Hi, and thanks for watching this message video. We're starting a short series called Christmas Plus Traditions, and today I'm going to be answering the question that a lot of followers or Christians have asked over the years, which is God okay with our Christmas traditions? Or in other words, is God okay with what it is that we have turned Christmas into? For example, a lot of Christians understand that December 25th is not the actual birthday of Jesus. It's just something that we celebrate in the winter solstice, even though he wasn't born then. It's a day that we set aside to recognize God with us, or Emmanuel. And I think a lot of Christians understand that a lot of our Christmas celebrations, or the things that we have become familiar with, have actually been borrowed from a Roman holiday referred to as Saturnalia. And as a result, again, a lot of them have questioned, hey, is God okay with this? That's what I'm going to be talking about today. But before I dig into that, let me ask you this question. What is it that you need to experience for Christmas to feel real? Or what needs to happen to make the Christmas season feel like it has officially begun? Some people say that the Christmas season never ends. Yet others will say that until the decorations are up, or until they've heard certain Christmas songs, or until they've seen certain Christmas movies, or consumed certain food or drink, that the Christmas season just hasn't arrived yet. And for some, Christmas is just really all about the shopping. And so they're consumed with getting the gifts or the stocking stuffers. Yes, Jesus is in the midst of all of that somewhere in there. But because of this, a lot of people have questioned, hey, is God okay with this? Especially considering how many people in the world, or particularly now in the U.S., have dismissed or removed Christ completely from Christmas. For example, according to U.S. survey results in 2019, 90% of Americans celebrate Christmas. However, 56% do not celebrate any religious beliefs or the birth of Jesus. In fact, 41% say Christmas is a celebration of love. As for traditions, 64% say a Christmas tree is the most important tradition. And believe it or not, 65% enjoy giving and receiving gifts. However, as you may have expected, 12% say Christmas is pure stress. So once again, what is the right approach when it comes to being a follower of God and our Christmas traditions? Meaning, is God okay with what it is that we are doing to celebrate or commemorate all that he has done for us? Or have our traditions created a diminishing impact on the world? To answer this question, let's first dig into whether or not God is okay with us creating traditions in the first place. The short answer to this is yes, especially when it is to commemorate all of the good things that God has done for us. For example, in the Old Testament, in the book of Esther, we see that the Jews were caught up in an evil plan or a plot to annihilate them or kill them. The reason for this is that King Xerxes of the Persians had been convinced through deception that the Jews were a threat. As a result, a date had been set for their annihilation by the casting of dice, or the casting of lots, or what the Jews referred to as Purim. However, through the faithfulness of Esther and her older cousin Mordecai, King Xerxes was made aware of this deception, and the Jews were spared. Take a look at what it is that they did to celebrate all that God had done for them, and what it is that they asked the future generations of Jews to do as well, to remember what God had done for them. And notice how many of these celebrations or traditions are very similar to our Christmas traditions. Esther 9:19 through 22. So to this day, rural Jews living in remote villages celebrate an annual festival and holiday on the appointed day in late winter, when they rejoice and send gifts of food to each other. Mordecai recorded these events and sent letters to the Jews near and far throughout all the provinces of King Xerxes, calling on them to celebrate an annual festival on these 2 days. He told them to celebrate these days with feasting and gladness, and by giving gifts of food to each other and presents to the poor. This would commemorate a time when the Jews gained relief from their enemies, when their sorrow was turned into gladness and their mourning into joy. Based upon what we see here in the book of Esther, I think it's safe to say that God is okay with us creating traditions of our own to commemorate all the good things that he has done for us, even if they include feasting. And just so you know, feasting, by definition, means an abundance of drink, of dancing, and the consumption of a lot of choice foods, or in other words, frivolity. This is good. This is what God actually says that we should engage in. In fact, did you know that the wisest man on the planet at one point in time, Solomon, the son of King David, stated multiple times that you and I should be engaged in frivolity to help us make it through this life. In fact, here's what he said. Ecclesiastes 3:10 through 13. I have seen the burden God has placed on us all. Yet, God has made everything beautiful for its own time. He has planted eternity in the human heart. But even so, people cannot see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to end. So, I concluded there is nothing better than to be happy and enjoy ourselves as long as we can. And people should eat and drink and enjoy the fruits of their labor, for these are gifts from God. What Solomon was talking about is the personal energy that it takes, or what it is that we expend in dealing with the things that we have to face right now in this life, whether that's the personal issues, whether that's the financial struggles, or whether that's the relationship dynamics that we have, etc., versus the energy that is gained when we gather together with others to engage in celebrating all the things that God has done for us and enjoy them while putting our focus on all that God has done for us / promised to us in eternity. So again, to help us carry the burden of life, it was recommended multiple times that you and I should regularly enjoy frivolity with others, to celebrate what God has given us and enjoy what He's done for us. So in the great debate of when the Christmas season actually begins, I think if Solomon lived in our day and age, he would have said, hey man, the Christmas season never ends. And the truth is Solomon would have been one heck of a dude to party with. But let's face it, when it comes to Christmas and partying, this hasn't always been promoted within our country. In fact, when our country was being formed in the mid-1600s, the New England Puritans were led by William Bradford, who made it his personal mission to actually stamp out what he referred to as pagan mockery, or the frivolity that came with it. In fact, in 1659, the General Court of Massachusetts enacted a law making any observance of December 25th, other than a church service, a penal offense, and people were fined for hanging decorations. The reason for this is because of what I mentioned earlier about the Roman pagan holiday Saturnalia, which was to honor their god of agriculture, Saturn, and what they celebrated every winter solstice. And how they celebrated was by hanging boughs, evergreen boughs from spruce, fir, pine, it doesn't matter, all over the place. Reason being, they smell good, and they represented eternal life, or life through the dead of winter. And of course, they would hang ribbons and bows of color and ornaments and all kinds of things, and it was festive and lots of feasting, and ultimately, it was a wonderful time. Now, ultimately, the main goal of all of this celebration, though, wasn't just to create frivolity, it was to show love toward everyone. In fact, according to the historical records, this particular holiday amongst the Romans was one where everybody, including the slaves, were treated as equals and allowed to participate in all the joy. In fact, they were oftentimes the ones who were showered with the gifts of food or given candles for light. Or, in some cases, masters of slaves would place a slave at the head of the banquet table and serve them themselves. Which brings me back to the traditions that the Jews were creating, if you remember. All of those were intended to help those who were poor or disadvantaged. Meaning that even though, yes, we should engage in partying to help soothe our souls, it was never meant to be something that we would do so for just simply our own indulgences without looking out toward others that are around us. So in other words, the Christmas traditions we embrace as followers of Christ should always be aimed at showing love towards God and others. In fact, if you're a follower of Christ, think about this for a second. Everything that was ever required of the Jews, or those who were followers of God in the Old Testament, was summed up by Jesus, as well as everything that was ever required of those of us who are a part of the New Testament followers, was summed up by Jesus in this way. Matthew 22:37 through 40. You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments. Love is the most important thing. Love has always been the most important thing. Love is the aim, period, end of story. So when you and I are creating traditions, whether it's to commemorate all that God has done for us or anybody else, they should always, 100% of the time, be aimed at loving God or loving others. That's the key. But that isn't always the case, is it? There are many times where we become distracted, and instead of getting engaged in loving actions toward others, we become a little bit preoccupied in our own traditions. For instance, this happened in Jesus' day with the religious leaders who had become preoccupied with being holy, similar to the Puritans, preoccupied with being holy and forgot what it really meant to be expressing love toward others and engaging with others. And in this particular situation with Jesus and the religious leaders of that day, they had become enamored with their hand-washing ceremonies. And so they confronted Jesus and his disciples because they weren't engaged in their traditions. And look what he told them. Mark 7, 5 through 13. So the Pharisees and teachers of religious law asked him, "Why don't your disciples follow our age-old tradition? They eat without first performing the hand-washing ceremony." Jesus replied, "You hypocrites. Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you, for he wrote, 'These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Their worship is a farce, for they teach man-made ideas as commands from God. For you ignore God's law and substitute your own tradition.'" Then he said, "You skillfully sidestep God's law in order to hold on to your own tradition. For instance, Moses gave you this law from God. Honor your father and mother, and anyone who speaks disrespectfully of father or mother must be put to death. But you say it is all right for people to say to their parents, 'Sorry, I can't help you, for I have vowed to give to God what I would have given to you.' In this way, you let them disregard their needy parents. And so you cancel the word of God in order to hand down your own tradition. And this is only one example among many others." Jesus' criticism against these guys wasn't that they were creating traditions of their own. It was that they were creating traditions that were violating the law of love and creating traditions that ultimately were self-serving and lame. So, as a follower of Christ, know this. God is totally okay with you and I creating traditions of our own to commemorate or to celebrate the good things that God has done for us. And God is totally okay with us enjoying frivolity with others while putting our focus on the good things that He has done for us, as well as all that He has planned for us in eternity. These are things that help us to be able to cope with and deal with this life now. However, in the creation of these traditions, it is never a good idea that you and I would become focused only on satisfying the soothing of our own souls or our own indulgences and lose sight of what it is that God has called us to do to genuinely express love toward others. And the truth is, that is the greatest tradition that Christ has ever established. And there is no end to that season.